Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to our ProRevenge, where many of you come to listen to stories about people getting what they deserve. In today's episode, we have 5 stories. The first involves an original poster, or OP, who receives some borderline psychotic messages from someone on Tinder and goes on a mission to ruin them. The second story is a bit longer and involves a dog sitter who completely trashes OP's sister's house while they're on vacation. She blames it on chaos, not a ghost. I'm kidding about that part, but it's a really good story. I hope you all stay for the tales today and hit that subscribe button for future stories. Let's get into it. This first story is titled, Threaten Me on a Dating App? Watch while your life crumbles around you. When I was 19 or 20, I'm 25 now, I met a guy on Tinder. Let's call him Brad. Brad and I didn't get off to a great start, but I had no idea how bad things would get. At first, it just seemed like we were incompatible, as he was being pushy and rude, and I don't tolerate that behavior. If it had stopped there, I wouldn't be sharing this story. But it didn't stop there. Once I made it clear that I found Brad repulsive and wanted nothing to do with him, his messages took a dark turn. He threatened to stalk, kidnap, and murder me, including gory details about gouging my eyes and defiling my corpse. Particularly disturbing was his explicit desire to strangle me and watch the life leave my eyes. He also managed to find my home address, 3 hours away from the city we were in, and threatened to come find me. As a side note, it was my dad's house, and a small part of me wanted to see how badly it would have turned out for him if he showed up there. Of course, I warned my dad and gave him a picture of the guy. I also took screenshots of everything Brad sent me. Being a young woman with no idea whether this madman would actually go to lengths to find me, I called the police. When they arrived, they looked at the messages and told me they constituted terroristic threats. However, they also said there wasn't much they could do unless Brad actually showed up. They did take down his details, including where he worked, which was listed in his Tinder bio. This will be important later. From what I understand, the police went to Brad's workplace to speak with him, but he refused to cooperate, so they left, and nothing came of it initially. For the second part of my petty revenge, I found Brad's Facebook profile. A word of advice: don't put your workplace on all your social media. I snooped around and managed to find a couple of his family members. I sent them all the screenshots along with an explanation of what happened. I didn't hear back for a few days, but when I did, it was from Brad's mom. She apologized profusely on behalf of her son and told me they were driving in from Brad's hometown 3 states away to confront him. I don't know what became of that confrontation, but I hope he got a good old-fashioned talking to. A few years later, when Brad probably thought he was in the clear, something jogged my memory of what he did, and I decided it was time for him to face some actual consequences. I made a Facebook post including his picture, bio, all the screenshots, and a message warning people in our area about him. I asked them to share it so other women would know exactly what they were dealing with. 2 days later, Facebook took the post down, but the damage had already been done. 3,000 shares and many messages later, all that information had made its way to his company's Facebook page. From what I understand, they were absolutely flooded with messages about Brad and his behavior. They responded with a standard message about how they were handling it according to their policies, which was disheartening, as I assumed they were just going to brush it off. By this point, Brad had been working for them for at least 4 years. However, I soon learned that was not the case. Several women from his company messaged me to thank me for coming forward and exposing the kind of person they were working with. Through one of these women, I found out what happened to good old Brad. He was called into a meeting with his boss, HR, and the CEO of the company. As a side note, this is a multinational company, and the CEO is a woman. They did not take the situation lightly. Within 2 days of my Facebook post, Brad had been fired and escorted off the premises by armed security. In the end, Brad got what he deserved. He now has a massive blank spot on his resume, as this company was his first job out of college, and he can no longer get a letter of recommendation from them. As for what became of him, I don't know. I never heard from him again, though I did get a message from his grandma claiming that what I was doing was illegal. Guys, this happens more often than you think on dating sites. I've had a few female friends who've experienced almost the same thing. A guy would message them, calling them beautiful and charming, but as soon as they got a reply they didn't like, it was like a switch flipped. They'd receive crazy, aggressive messages like "you're so fat, you're ugly, nobody wants to date you anyway, I hope you get hit by a bus," and so on. One guy even threatened to find my friend, claiming he knew where she worked and lived. He went completely unhinged, but thankfully, nothing came of that situation. In this case, Brad just happened to mess with the wrong person that day. The next story is titled, Don't Tell Mom the Dog Sitter's Dead. My sister moved from Florida to South Carolina about a year ago, but she still visits us periodically. We're a big, close family, so shortly after Thanksgiving, she flew down with her husband and son for one such visit. She has 3 geriatric dogs, so she hired a house and dog sitter. My sister went through the basics. The dogs can only be fed at certain times, they need to be let out at specific times, and they must be in their crates from certain hours. Most importantly, they don't get treats. They get vitamins instead. But those vitamins can only be given twice a day, and no human food is allowed. The dogs are on very strict diets, and they're happy and healthy only because my sister is so diligent with their routine. The lady my sister hired to watch her dogs had stellar reviews on the site where she was found. She's a stay-at-home mom who does this as a side gig for extra cash. You might already guess where this is going. My sister left for Florida for a week. The first 5 days went well. The dog sitter texted my sister regularly, sent pictures, made video calls, and gave updates on when she came and went from my sister's house. My sister has some health problems and keeps a ton of prescription medication in her medicine cabinet for epilepsy, asthma, and allergies. She brought enough for the week but left the rest at home, including a full bottle of painkillers from when she had her son not long ago, which she never used. This is relevant later. On top of that, she's been a collector of rare beer for about 15 years. She has beers that aren't even sold anymore because they were promotional items, and she keeps them mostly as decoration in her kitchen. On the 6th day of her vacation, the dog sitter stopped all communication. My sister texted, called, and emailed. Nothing. It was radio silence. She had a bad feeling but didn't want to ruin the mood since she doesn't get to see her family often. On day 7, she took a late flight back to South Carolina, arriving around 2 in the morning. After an hour's drive to their rural town, they got home and found the front door wide open. The lawn looked like someone had tried to drift a truck over the grass and into a tree before speeding off. My sister tended to her groggy, screaming nephew, fearing the worst, that someone had robbed the house while the dog sitter was there. Her husband went inside to survey the damage. It was all clear, so my sister and nephew went in too. The back door was wide open, the couch looked like it had exploded, and the rug and pretty much every square foot of the bottom floor were covered in dog pee and poop, the kind only 3 geriatric dogs could produce. The dogs were thankfully still in the backyard, but they were shivering and filthy. Broken beer bottles were everywhere, some stuffed deep into a trash can to hide the evidence, others refilled with water and precariously placed back to look untouched. 82 growler-sized bottles, each roughly 64 ounces, were gone. The medicine cabinet was like a ghost town, with everything gone. My sister immediately suspected the dog sitter had thrown a party because no one, especially someone 5 feet 6 inches tall and 170 pounds, could drink that much beer and take that many pills without serious consequences. She called the police, who arrived and assumed there had been a break-in. They took pictures and noted all the missing bottles and drugs. My sister cleaned what she could and went to sleep, as the upstairs was untouched. One day later, the police found the dog sitter. My sister had feared she'd been kidnapped or worse, but they found her truck run off the side of the highway, about 2 miles away. She was walking along the road, completely out of it, screaming at nothing. They took her in on charges, I'm not sure which ones, and her husband bailed her out. According to him, this wasn't the first time. She had a history of drug and alcohol problems. At first, the dog sitter messaged my sister, apologizing profusely and promising to reimburse her, begging her not to press charges. My sister quoted her for the cost of the rug, a new couch, and vet bills, as the dogs had somehow gotten into 9 containers of dog vitamins, and one was suffering from liver failure. The total cost was around $800. My sister didn't bother with the cost of the beers, meds, lawn, or house cleaning, though she probably should have. She also demanded that the dog sitter never work as a dog sitter again and refund the dog sitting fee. My sister works in advertising. I won't specify what kind, but she has the means to ruin this woman's reputation if she ever advertised herself as a dog sitter again. The dog sitter promised to pay everything back, but said my sister would have to wait until they got their tax refund. My sister waited. By late February, she texted the dog sitter asking for her money. The dog sitter immediately claimed she'd done nothing wrong, called my sister a bad dog owner, and said her dogs were miserable and none of the damages were her fault. She then offered, as a courtesy, a $200 credit at a furniture store owned by her friend and an old rug she didn't want anymore. My sister was floored. The dog sitter paid about $500, but insisted she'd send a coupon soon. March came and went with nothing. Around March 20th, my sister filed a claim in small claims court. She sent the dog sitter a message saying, "As a courtesy, I'm letting you know I just filed this at small claims court." That's when things got interesting. The dog sitter went off threatening to sue for slander, undue distress, and harassment, and called my sister a slew of nasty names, including the C word multiple times. My sister saved all of it. On April 6th, the court date arrived. The dog sitter showed up looking disheveled and gave the judge a sob story about how she provided the best care for my sister's animals and how my sister was making it all up. My sister had the original police officer with her, along with pictures of the damages, vet bills, broken bottles, proof she was out of town, and police reports of both the break-in and the dog sitter's DWI the following day. The dog sitter tried to argue that a law about not serving alcohol to a known alcoholic applied, which was quickly dismissed. She then appealed to the judge and my sister's sense of humanity, claiming her husband had left her, was suing for full custody, and that she couldn't support herself or get her kids back without dog-sitting. The judge sided with my sister for obvious reasons. The dog sitter is now homeless, living with her parents, and her kids don't want to see her. Apparently, she was abusive to them and ran her husband's credit into the ground. She has 60 days to pay the remaining $300 or face jail time. Her husband has already filed for divorce, and she lost her license due to the DWI. My sister's dogs are doing well. She got a replacement couch on Amazon for about $75 and a nice, fluffy rug for even less. The dog sitter eventually sent the promised coupon, but it was useless. $20 off a purchase of $500 or more. What a wild ride this story was. I'm upset that all the rare beer my sister collected is gone. How did this dog sitter even get good reviews? Surely someone would have left a review saying, "Horrendous dog sitter." I had 16 Heinekens in the fridge, and in 5 hours she drank them all and blamed my Great Dane. This next story is titled, "Aggressively Speeding Through a Residential Neighborhood. Now your car is wrecked, and it's your fault." A few years ago, one day, my kids were skating on a quarter pipe when this truck came around the corner. The driver, let's call him Bubba, saw my daughter come off the quarter pipe. Instead of slowing down, he floored it, ripping past my house while still accelerating and yelling something like, "Keep off the road, you silly kids!" The following weekend, I was mowing my lawn when I saw this guy coming again. I walked to the edge of my property and tried to wave him down to talk. Bubba floored it again, laughing like a maniac as he sped by with his engine redlining. This guy was trouble. So, I went to the hardware store and picked up 3 3-foot orange safety cones. I placed a sign on each that read, "Slow down, residential neighborhood, kids at play." A few days later, I came outside to find the cones had been run over. I knew exactly who did it, and I was pretty upset. Really angry, actually. In that anger, I came up with a brilliant plan. I returned to the hardware store and purchased 3 new cones, along with some cement and steel rebar. I filled those orange cones with rebar and cement and let them set. Once the cones were ready, I placed them back on the side of the street by my house with the same signs as before. It didn't take long. 2 days later, I was tinkering in my garage when I heard that darn truck engine revving up as Bubba went pedal to the metal. I looked up just in time to see his truck steer toward the shoulder to deliberately run over the cones. Man, it was the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. He hit the first cone with his bumper, and the cone fell forward, rotating the base up toward his engine block. It actually lifted the front of the truck upward. As his front passenger wheel made direct contact with the second cone, the truck launched even higher in the air. The third cone also made a direct hit on his right tire suspension, and his truck came to a screeching halt. Fluids were running out from under his truck, and his passenger tire was angled inward at a 90-degree angle. Bubba was furious, screaming about how I wrecked his truck and how I was going to pay. I yelled back, "Well then, let's call the cops and get them out here to make a report. You can tell them how you were racing down the road and intentionally running over safety cones, or I can call you a tow truck. Which one will it be?" We called the tow truck, and I never saw Bubba drive down my street again. After that incident, I was worried he'd try to get revenge, but nothing ever happened. We moved out a couple of years later. I'm not very familiar with the law, but in this case, would OP have been held liable for any damages caused to Bubba's truck? I mean, you shouldn't be running over traffic cones anywhere, right? But could Bubba have sued and won because OP knowingly filled the cones with cement with the intent to cause damage to someone's vehicle? I'd love to know, so please leave your comments below if you have an answer. This next story is titled, "Friend Wants a Free Camping Trip? We Leave Her Stranded." This story is about my friend Frankie. She was a bit of a freeloader, not a full-blown thief, but the type who'd take change from your cup holder or off your dresser, or snag cigarettes from your pack when you weren't looking. She'd borrow $5 and never pay it back, or put a drink on your tab at the bar and act like she paid for it. Petty stuff like that. She wasn't exactly liked, but she was tolerated for some reason. My buddies and I had planned a road and camping trip to Colorado for months. Frankie found out at the last minute and begged to come along. We said no way. The car was already packed to the brim with 3 guys and all our camping gear. She kept begging, saying she just needed a ride to Denver and wouldn't join the actual camping trip. She promised to split the gas evenly and even bring a ½ ounce of weed. We were young and broke, on a shoestring budget, so her offer to split gas was tempting. We reluctantly agreed under a few conditions. 1, we see the money and the weed before she gets in the car. 2, she takes a shower. And 3, no nonsense once we get to Denver. She was notorious for pulling stunts like, "Take me to this bar, so-and-so owes me $20, only for that person to conveniently not be there." The day came and we pulled up to where she was staying. She came out and we asked her to show us what she promised. She pulled out a fat bag and $60 and we said, "Okay." She asked for a couple of minutes to get her stuff and came back with a little backpack. We squeezed her in. About an hour out of town, we asked her to roll one up from the bag. She agreed but pulled out a skimpy eighth. When we asked what happened to the bag, she said she split it into eighths in case we needed to sell one along the way. At the first fill-up, we all pitched in, and she tossed in $5. Fine. At the next fill-up, she pulled out singles and a handful of quarters. By the third fill-up, she claimed she lost all her money and the other eighths of weed. We all realized the ruse and silently agreed we'd get her to Denver, drop her off, and go on with our vacation as planned. Fast forward, we entered Denver city limits and asked where she needed to go. She gave a vague address like 124 Oak Street. We said, "Okay, call your friend and tell us how to get there." This was way before GPS. She claimed she didn't have the number and was told she could just show up. Smelling the nonsense, we stopped at a gas station, checked a local map, and found the way to this place. We ended up at 124 Oak Street in a really nice area with $500,000 homes. We were internally laughing as we searched for the address, knowing it was a joke. We found it, and she got out with her bag, asking us to wait in case her friend wasn't home. We laughed again as a middle-aged, well-to-do guy answered the door, saw our beat-up car in the driveway and this dreadlocked hippie girl knocking. We don't know what he said, but she returned to the car with a story about how they just bought the house a week ago, and her friend moved out. It was a complete joke at this point, but we played along and asked what we should do. She suggested finishing the camping trip with us, saying her friend owed her $100 and she'd pay us back with a huge bag of weed for the trouble. We knew this was nonsense, but without talking, we agreed she needed to learn a lesson. We said okay and headed out, talking about the first campsite. I mentioned that if we were all sharing a tent for the next few days, we needed showers first and suggested a truck stop. Frankie had no money, so we scraped together quarters for her to use. I said we'd meet at the diner next door when done, and she mentioned wanting pancakes, saying she was starving. This was the final straw. She had no money, expected someone to buy her pancakes, and planned to mooch off our camping food. Without a word, the minute she went for her shower, we gathered her stuff, left it with the counter lady with a note saying, "You got your ride to Denver," and took off. We never looked back. This was before cell phones were common, so we had no idea what happened next. It was a lesson she needed to learn. You can't lie and manipulate people your whole life and get away with it forever. She was stuck at a truck stop, 1,000 miles from home, penniless, all because she thought she could score a free Colorado camping trip and pancakes. Oh my goodness, Frankie seems like a real piece of work. Driving to Denver, faking an address and ringing a doorbell to pretend she knew the person who lived there, only to claim they mysteriously sold their house a week ago? She deserves an award for this terrible acting. I hope she learned her lesson, got home safely, and never pulled this stuff again. This final story is titled "Boss Blocks My Promotion, So I Block His Job." For background, I work in a very competitive part of the service industry. It's a large enough community but small enough that someone somewhere knows you. It's important not to burn bridges, as you may find yourself at a disadvantage one day. I was in my position for 3 years as middle management. No call-outs, never late, always staying late to help my team, and working on projects that belonged to my bosses. One day, I got into a car accident while working the night shift. It was raining, which is important later. My car was undrivable, and I had to wait for a tow truck and deal with insurance. Finding a ride late at night was tough, so I couldn't go to work. At the time, my director had been let go, and there was a fierce competition to see who would get his promotion. For hierarchy purposes, it was my director, my direct bosses, all at the same level of authority than me. One of the direct bosses, let's call him Rick, decided he was getting the promotion. He started shaking up our department, restructuring projects, changing shifts, and taking credit for others' work. He was a real pain. A few weeks into this, he switched me from morning to night shifts. I didn't complain since we were short-handed, and the team needed help, especially newer members with children. I understood how this could affect their lives. A few weeks later, I got into the car accident, which forced me to call out. This didn't sit well with Rick, who said I made the team suffer because I was irresponsible. I didn't think much of it. Knowing stress makes people say things they don't mean. Soon after, I met some higher-ups from another department who offered me a job in a new venture the business was exploring. I was a good candidate because of my work experience and traits. It was a promotion in position and salary, and my network of contacts would help me grow further. I went through interviews and was offered the position. I signed the paperwork and shook hands. A couple of days later, HR called to say the position was rescinded and that it shouldn't come as a surprise. I was shocked and requested a meeting to understand the decision. At the meeting, HR and Rick were present. After standard greetings, Rick explained that he blocked my promotion because of an attendance issue, the one call-out due to my accident. HR chimed in, saying it shouldn't deter me from applying again in 6 months. I accepted defeat because I still needed my job and didn't want to make myself a target. A few days later, a friend who worked close to Rick told me that Rick had said he didn't want to fire me because it would leave the night shift uncovered, and no one would easily take that shift. I was furious, but decided not to act, as it's a small industry. A few months later, a competing company opened nearby, and several people, including me, left to join them. I was hired by an amazing boss who I'm still friends with years later. He offered me a great position and a significant salary raise. For hierarchy purposes, it was my boss, then me and my counterpart, then our assistants. I heard through the grapevine that Rick was rejected for the director position at my old company and was leaving. About a week later, my boss called me to review new hires for my counterpart's position. He said, "Hey, this guy comes from your old company. What do you know about him?" To my delight, it was Rick's name. I'd been hiring assistants from my previous company, so I guess Rick thought he was next. I told my boss how Rick blocked my promotion, how he was untrustworthy, and wouldn't fit the team. We didn't even give him an interview. Looking back, we should have given him the interview and just said no. That would have made it sweeter. Like I said, don't burn bridges in a small industry, OP. You totally should have given him the interview, offered the job, waited for him to accept, then rescinded it last minute and met with him to explain why he didn't get it. After diving into these tales, I want to share my thoughts. Story 1. Threaten me on a dating app? Watch while your life crumbles around you. Brad's vile threats were chilling. His violent messages and finding the narrator's address screamed danger. I admire her quick action, screenshotting everything and alerting the police, though their initial inaction was frustrating. Sharing the evidence with his family and later exposing him on Facebook was brilliant. I'd have been too scared to escalate. His firing, escorted by security, was deeply satisfying. The CEO's response shows zero tolerance for such behavior. I hope he's still jobless. The narrator's courage turned a terrifying ordeal into a powerful takedown. Story 2. Don't tell mom the dog sitter's dead. The dog sitter's betrayal, trashing the house, stealing meds and rare beers, and neglecting the dogs was infuriating. I felt for the narrator's sister, finding her home in chaos and her dogs sick. The sitter's audacity, blaming the sister and offering a useless coupon, was galling. Taking it to small claims court with solid evidence was a smart move. I'd have pushed for more damages. The sitter's downfall, homeless, divorced, and licenseless, feels like karma. I hope the dogs recovered fully and the sister's diligence paid off. Story 3. Aggressively speeding through a residential neighborhood? Now your car is wrecked. Bubba's reckless speeding and taunting kids were dangerous and infuriating. The narrator's cement-filled cones were a genius trap. I'd have cheered seeing his truck wrecked. His tantrum afterward was pathetic. I love that he backed down when faced with cops or a tow. Legally, he'd have a weak case since he intentionally hit the cones, but intent could have been tricky to defend. I'd have added a smile for the camera sign. This story proves creative revenge can stop a menace cold. Story 4. Friend wants a free camping trip? We leave her stranded. Frankie's freeloading, lying about money and weed, was exasperating. Her fake address stunt in Denver was next-level nerve. I'd have kicked her out sooner. Leaving her at the truck stop with a note was cold but deserved. I laughed imagining her shock. I'd have been tempted to lecture her first, but their silent exit was smoother. This story shows you can't mooch forever without consequences. I hope she learned her lesson, though I doubt it. The group's unity made this revenge perfect. Story 5. Boss blocks my promotion, so I block his job. Rick's petty power trip, blocking the narrator's promotion over one unavoidable call-out, was infuriating. His scheming to keep the narrator on night shifts while taking credit for others' work showed his true colors. I'd have been livid but less patient than the narrator. Blocking his job application years later was sweet justice. I'd have savored his shocked face in an interview. In a small industry, his bridge burning backfired beautifully. The narrator's new role and raise. Prove karma rewards integrity. That wraps up this episode of ProRevenge. Thanks for joining me for the stories today. If you guys missed the last episode of our ProRevenge, you need to listen to it right now. I hope you guys got your revenge fix for the day, and I'll see you in the next one.